Welcome to 49ers After Dark. We're your hosts, Jessie Naylor, Grant Cohn. Trade deadline came. Trade deadline went. Niners made their move. Traded for Chase Young. Other teams made moves too. Seahawks made moves. They traded for Leonard Williams, Frank Clark. Niners also got Randy Gregory. Don't forget about Randy Gregory. So the question is, did the 49ers win at the trade deadline, Jesse?
Ooh, I think I think this is a little bit of a loaded question just because I think that the 49ers won the Chase Young trade. I think that trade, if I was grading that trade, I would give it an A+ because I don't feel like there's any risk. It's not like they added a bunch of money to their books. They don't have to commit to him long term. And really all they did was give up a compensatory pick. So I think they won that trade. I don't necessarily think they won the trade deadline, though. And those two things are separate to me. I feel like the 49ers really, if they were going to win this trade deadline, would somehow have brought in something to beef up their offensive line, which would have been really, really hard to do because most teams are not willing to give up offensive linemen, or they would have beefed up their secondary. And they did neither of those things. So they got a good player. I think they got better. I think they certainly won that trade, but I don't necessarily think they won the trade deadline because of those things.
Sure. Like, did they improve as much as the Seahawks did? Again, the Seahawks added Leonard Williams, Frank Clark to their defense. Mm-hmm. They're in first place. They have 2 losses. The Niners have 3. Which team improved more?
I think Seattle, mostly because that's a position of need for them. Mm-hmm. It would have been like the 49ers getting a cornerback.
Mm-hmm. Right, because their secondary is good. They have Devin Witherspoon. Right. They have Tariq Woolen.
Right.
They have a bunch of players back there. Yeah, I think the Seahawks won the trade deadline. And you said it was an A+ trade for the 49ers. Okay. But from Washington's perspective, like, they didn't want Chase Young at all. He was a massive disappointment for them in a lot of ways.
For sure.
So I guess there's not a lot of risk. That's what you could say. You give up a 3rd round pick that you didn't really need, and you have more. But it's not necessarily a slam dunk that he's going to be a big-time producer. He wasn't that for Washington. Was he?
Well, I mean, he instantly comes to a team and leads the team in sacks. Or, he has more sacks than anybody on the team. I guess he doesn't lead the team per se because he hasn't gotten a sack on the team, but he has more sacks than anybody else on this team right now at this point in the year.
Yeah.
One thing we can't say about Chase Young, though, is we can't presume that he's going to improve the way that other players we would say that about because they're getting coached by Kasarik and they're coming to a team with a lot better players around him. He is coming from a Washington team that had really, really good players on that defensive line. So he was already playing with an elite defensive line, and now he's just joining presumably another one.
I do think it's interesting that the Niners seem adamant that they're one defensive end away from being the best team in the league. That's what they think it is. Like, they thought it was Drake Jackson. They put all their eggs in that basket. Didn't work out. Then they pivoted to Randy Gregory, gave him 3 weeks, were unsatisfied, and now they're going to Chase Young, option number 3. And we'll see. Like, is this guy going to be their version of Christian McCaffrey this year? Is he going to transform things? I feel like the problem with this team, I keep saying it today, is like, you can't stop the run. You keep giving up quick completions. That's the best way to negate a pass rush. Run the ball and throw quick passes. You keep giving those up. I don't care how many pass rushers you have. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about that. There's other things that need to be fixed. He's not going to come in and do to the defense, in my opinion, by himself what CMC was able to do to the offense. Immediately, CMC brought a whole different element than what they had last year. They went from 18 points a game to 26 points a game overnight, and that was because of CMC. If their defense improves, it's not because just Chase Young. Now, Chase Young certainly should make them better, but not so much better that all of a sudden they go from where they've been the last few weeks to an elite defense. That if that happens, that's because they just fix things internally.
Okay, and I guess my final question here is, the Niners clearly feel they're a good defensive end away, opposite Bosa, from being the best team in the league. Mm-hmm. Is that true? Are they right?
No. I mean, I think that the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan said it, John Lynch said it, and I agree with him. they already had a bunch of assets dumped into that defensive line. So to me, they had the pieces in-house to make this work. Certainly doesn't hurt by any means, but I don't think that, no, I can't correlate those two. Absolutely not.
No. I mean, maybe if Chase Young can set the edge against the run, that'll help. But until someone can do that the way Samson Ebukam did last year, Niners are going to have a problem. And I don't know that pass rush is going to solve it. Because if you look at their pressure rates, their pass rush looks like it's technically better than last year. It's just not having as much time to finish the job. So did they win at the trade deadline? It would have been nice if they had gotten a corner or a run defender or an offensive lineman. But they got Chase Young. And I think they're looking at him like, maybe they're looking at him like, here's what he has in common with Christian McCaffrey. He burst on the scene. He was good immediately. He missed a couple years with injury. And now it looks like he's healthy and producing. That's pretty much the Christian McCaffrey trajectory. And then he blossomed in the Niners.
Yeah, and I think he can blossom over here. And I don't think he was playing bad with Washington. Heck, the last year, I believe the 49er game was the first game he had coming off that injury was against the 49ers. And I thought he played really good then. You definitely can see that he impacts the game. That's why I said I think it is an A-plus trade just because of what they gave up and what they're potentially getting. I just don't think it was the biggest position of need. Take Drake Jackson and Chase Young and the gap of skill between those two, and now apply that to a corner that they could have inserted into the starting lineup between Oliver and whatever corner they got, like whatever that talent gap is, that would have been used in a lot better fashion for the defense than I would say a pass rusher would at this point.
I agree. Brother Bob's has been a member for 6 months. Thank you. Joseph Stockbridge, what are the chances Riverboat Ron becomes the Niners DC?
Mid-year. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to fire him. They seem to be kind of content with him. Maybe they're just going to rebuild and I don't know. Washington's kind of weird because of the ownership change and because of the name change and all the things that have happened there. They seem like a team that wants more stability potentially from a GM and coach. So they might just rebuild on the fly and keep him around. We'll see.
Yep. Frank Tom Ocean says at Nails, Ayuk for Pittman and Pitts in fantasy. Thanks.
Oh, I'll take the Pittman and Pitts for sure. I don't know what side you're on, but
I don't have a side. Bill Kennedy says, I have a gripe against NFL scheduling. No way a team should play on Thursday night and then play against a team coming off a bye. Your opinion?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I agree with that. I think I came up with a solution almost 2 years ago for the NFL. You add an extra week. Every team gets 2 bye weeks. You start week 4. You start the Thursday night game, and it goes all the way through week 16. And every team that plays on Thursday night is coming off of a bye. That's how you do that.
Yeah. Adam K says, just wanted to say you both are great. Keep it up.
Thank you, Adam.
Shady Luke says, it's your guys, Philly boy. Haha, no, but on the real, love the content. Can't wait to see what the Niners do against A.J. Brown. And number 2 defense overall graded DT on PFF, Jalen Carter. Keep it up. Really looking forward to see what that matchup looks like but this is a whole nother month of football. We'll see what happens. Yeah. All right. Brock Purdy crashing back down to earth. It's only been 3 games, though. He could turn it all around, but he hasn't yet. And in this moment, what is the most alarming thing about Brock Purdy's recent play or just play in general?
Yeah, Grant, I think the most alarming thing is that it's really not any different than who he has been. If you look at the Cleveland Browns game aside, the Cleveland Browns game was really bad almost all the way through. I think that game was an anomaly. Mm-hmm. But when I look at the last 2 games, and this is where people I think are getting caught up, because he played so well for most of those games until the very end. And so people are hanging their hat on what happened prior to those interceptions because he made some good throws. He looked good. He looked like himself, frankly. He looked like he had always been playing. But that to me is actually the most concerning thing because Brock Purdy has not played any different the last 2 weeks, Grant. In fact, you can go all the way back to college. He would put the ball in harm's way a lot in college. Then his rookie year, nobody wanted to talk about it, but he was I think, 21st among starting quarterbacks in turnover worthy plays, but defenses weren't catching the interceptions. So people didn't want to talk about that. Then we got into training camp. You reported all the time that he was throwing interceptions. People didn't want to talk about that because it was training camp and he was testing the limits and all these other things. Then we get into the regular season this year. He's not turning the ball over, but again, he's got a high turnover worthy play percentage. And finally, just now, teams are capitalizing on what he has always done. Brock Purdy right now of starting quarterbacks ranks 30th in turnover worthy play percentage. That is not good. However, he's always done this. So I think the most concerning or alarming thing is that Brock had always been doing this. Defenses just weren't capitalizing. And so now people are starting to open their eyes and their ears are perking up and they're like, hold on, he's in a slump, right? No, he's playing like he's always played. Teams are just capitalizing. So if teams continue to capitalize, you're going to see this type of stuff happen. If they don't, then he absolutely can go back to his winning ways and all the things that were great. But nothing has changed with Brock Purdy. And I think that is the most alarming thing.
Very alarming. And I think another thing that's alarming is that he's been blowing teams out for like the first 10 games of his career, scoring a lot of points, not in close games, makes it look easy. But his team, he has such a good supporting cast. It's unsustainable. His team was healthy. Finally, there's some injuries. Finally, you take a couple all-pros away from him, and you find him down just a few points. One-score games in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden, he looks like a choker, at least the last few weeks. Like, he brought him down the field against Cleveland, didn't finish the drive, didn't have to. But the next 2 weeks, I mean, he has 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter the last 2 weeks, 3 picks and a fumble. That's something we didn't know about him. And I think we're learning, like, maybe if the game is tight and he has to be a hero, quote unquote, and not just take what the defense gives him, then this turnover thing pops up big time. He doesn't just, not lead the drive. He turns it over again and again. That's a big problem. To me, that's a guy who would get benched on another team. Like, you see what happened to Jimmy Garoppolo? See what happened to Jimmy Garoppolo in Vegas? What would happen to Brock Purdy in Vegas? What would happen to Brock Purdy on other teams? I feel like that's what we're kind of seeing, man. Maybe they were pumping him up the way they pumped up Jimmy.
Well, we can look at this last game as an example to what I'm saying. This last game was really, really good. He did a lot of really good things. He started to get mobile, which was awesome to see as well. And I think that can help him, especially against man defenses. I think that's kind of his counterattack. He's been so great against zone, not so much against man, but that is something he can do, is get mobile and force them either out of man or force them to spy, what have you. But one thing that happened twice in that game was he put the ball in harm's way before any of the actual turnovers happened. They just weren't intercepted.
Second quarter.
Second quarter over the middle, and then he had one where he threw it to Ayuk on the outside and the ball just died on him and the corner broke inside. If he had broken out, it might have been a pick six. The point is he's always put the ball in harm's way. Teams either capitalize or they don't. When they capitalize, this is what you get. When they don't, what you saw for a big stretch of games is what you're going to get. So you're playing this risk game of, do they intercept it or do they not? The question is not, is he going to put the ball in harm's way? The answer is yes, he will put the ball in harm's way. The question is does the opposing team capitalize on it? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's the NFL.
Yeah. So maybe it's law of averages, but it seems like this thing was going to pop up. And I saw it in training camp. Maybe I made too big of a deal out of it, but I feel like a lot of people made not a big enough deal out of it. And I think maybe Kyle understood that you practice like you play. And now that this is happening, maybe he's not that surprised. I'm not that surprised. I was so surprised that he went 5 games without throwing a pick. Couldn't believe it. And now it's like, it's okay. It's averaging out. So we'll see. But right now I'm looking at what happened to Jimmy Garoppolo. He put up really good numbers last year with Christian McCaffrey, goes to the Raiders, doesn't even make it 8 games, benched for Aiden O'Connell. And I think it's fair to wonder, okay, well, what would Brock Purdy look like on another team? We've never seen that. What would Brock Purdy look like on terrible team A, like the Raiders? I mean, you take away Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, and all he has left, quote unquote, is Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Kyle Juszczyk, and he can't put up more than 17. That's a bad sign. And the turnovers are popping up. That's a bad sign.
Yeah, I think there was two questions that we had about Brock Purdy. And long term, we still don't necessarily know the answer to these things. But right now, I think we do for this season. The two questions were, can he win without all the elite talent around him? Can he continue to perform at that level? There is no. And the other question was, when they get deep in the playoffs and they inevitably meet an elite quarterback who does not care how good the 49ers defense is and puts up points, can he win in a shootout? And I think the answer is also no.
Yeah. So that's alarming. Is it worth seeing what they have in Sam Darnold, or is it like, have we seen that?
No. See, there's a point where the hate's gone too far, and Sam Darnold is where the hate's. I will say though. I was just going to say, he's not unbenchable. He hasn't built up that cachet. I'm not trying to act as if he just can't get benched if this continues. But right now, I think that would be a disaster. And I think it's actually closer than what people think. I do. But I also don't think it's the right decision.
Okay. I mean, if he's pressing and it's getting worse, like it went from 1 turnover against Cleveland to 2 against Minnesota to 3 against Cincinnati, and it could have been 5. I mean, if he's pressing and it's getting worse, he might just need a week off to just like relax. And I'm not saying Sam Darnold's good, but he had to play on the Jets and the Panthers. We haven't seen Brock Purdy have to play on teams like that. I'm just saying. So if Brock Purdy is just taking the team down with him, you might just want to give him a breather for a week. Just be like, you know what? You just woosah over here, and we're going to let Sam Darnold try to manage the game. And when you find yourself, let us know. I don't know.
I think
I don't trust him.
You hope that week is this bye week. That's what you hope. But again, it's not. He's not playing outside of Cleveland. Just remove that game because it was a bad game. But I also think that was an anomaly. What is he going to change? This is who he's been. This was a college thing. This was a last year thing. This is no different. So what is the expectation? Where is he going to change his game? What do you think is going to happen for the rest of this year that he's just going to be a completely different decision maker than what he's always been his whole entire career through college? It's just not. And that's my issue is with quarterbacks that are bad decision makers. It's why I don't like Sam. I think Sam's a worse decision maker. And so that's why I wouldn't go to Sam. But Brock is not a sound decision maker throughout a whole course of a game. He's just not.
All I'm going to say, and again, Sam Darnold didn't play much with the starters, although he did play a little bit with the starters in training camp when Brock had the occasional day off. Brock turned it over way more than Sam did in training camp. Maybe that means nothing. But Brock turned it over way more than Sam did. I'm just saying. Anyway,
Sam was ultra conservative, man. I mean, that's what you have to do. Yeah, you might be right about that. But in order to be ultra conservative, you also have to have a defense that is going to get stops. Because right now, the defense isn't getting stops. And so that is forcing him to play a little bit of hero ball. So now these mistakes are getting magnified. If that defense continues to not get stops, whether it's Sam or Brock,
that's true. That is true.
Play hero ball, and both of them will turn the ball over.
That's a good point. Yeah. Dave Barclay says, how much I miss? 20 minutes. Josh Bourne says, Brock Purdy was so perfect, we don't give him the benefit of the doubt to turn it around. What does Brock Purdy need to do to change minds? I think he can do it. Okay. Well, we'll see, Josh.
Again, Josh, my point is that these are things that I've talked about forever. But people don't want to listen to it until it's right in front of them, until it's at their doorstep. This is life. This is human life. If something happens bad in a neighboring state, you're like, oh, that's sad. But when it's at your front door, it's a whole different thing. Now it's like, oh, gosh, this is real. We got to do something about it. It has been there the whole time. But because the turnovers weren't happening, it wasn't a big deal. Oh, it's not a stat. It's not a stat when you talk about turnover-worthy plays. I care about actual interceptions. Okay, well, now they're here. So now you do care, right?
Dave Barclay says, were they really trying to get Adoree Jackson? Does Chase Young make us better? Price was right. How are you two doing tonight? So glad to witness you blow up like you have. 70,000 for both of you. Thank you. Yeah, hey, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet and you're watching this show, please subscribe to my channel. Please subscribe to Jesse's too. I would really appreciate it.
Don't say anything. Just
I don't know if they're really trying to get Adoree Jackson. And yes, Chase Young makes the 49ers better. Absolutely, he does. No question.
Yeah, he does.
Shady Luke says, funny thing is Niners fans harp on Bosa and the defense. They're still good. I don't see the offense pulling their weight. Why Niners fans excusing? Because Kyle doesn't want to put the blame on himself, so he's deflecting to the defense, and Niner fans are taking cues from him. Period.
Because Niner fans have this thing where there's two people that are off limits. It was Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy. You can't criticize them. Everybody else you can criticize on the team, but those two. So in order to protect those two, they have to criticize everybody else, which usually means you have to criticize the defense and Wilkes and all the other things.
Adam K says, you guys see Antonio Pierce press conference with the Raiders. I wish Kyle had half the passion towards his players and fans. Haven't seen it, but it's interesting. I feel like maybe owners are sort of like, maybe the pendulum's swinging, right? For a while, it was like, you need to be a total freaking nerd. You need to be a 35-year-old nerd to be a head coach in the NFL. And now it's like, well, maybe you need to have some actual passion and emotion to coach a team, because Robert Saleh's having so much success. I don't know.
Well, I think you're going to get a lot of that from ex-players as well.
Yeah.
Look at Campbell, look at DeMeco Ryans. The problem is not a lot of ex-players are coaches, and I think that's a bass-backwards way to do things.
And I feel like maybe it's easier to get an authentic version of that type of defensive coach, former player, actually has passion and emotion young, than the next offensive genius. Like, you try to find the next offensive genius, you might get Mike McDaniel or you might get Cliff Kingsbury.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You might just get a total freaking fraud. Dave Barclay says,
actually, you read the last one, just FYI.
Oh, all I need, thank you. Brother Bob says, all I need to know is Purdy Herbert per PP. Pretty better. Way better. Sorry, Brother Bob. Dave Barclay says, actually, forget that. I hope you both get 1 million subscribers. A million. I like that.
1 million. Thanks, man.
Nee says, feels like you're criticizing Brock more based on the hype around him and not the actual realistic expectations we should have had for a second-year quarterback, example, comparing 10-year vet Jimmy.
I mean, I'm just talking about his play. I'm not criticizing him any more than I ever have. What I'm saying today is what has always been there. It's what I've always said. It's what I said about him coming out of college. And that's why I had a 3rd-round grade on him, not a 1st-round grade, was this exact reason.
If Trey Lance ever lost 3 games in a row and committed 6 turnovers in those games, people would flip out. And it's like, yeah, okay, Brock has won 10 games. That's not a lot. We don't know really who Brock is yet. And this is sort of painting a new picture. And it adds to what we saw in training camp and college.
But I also do agree that here's the thing, Nees, is where did that hype and expectation come from? Because it didn't come from me. Grant hyping on to be the next thing in this league. Who did it actually come from? My chat for the last year has been filled with people hyping him up. So if you want to put him on that pedestal, then you have to be ready when things don't go as planned. You have to be. You don't get it both ways. You don't get to just praise, and then turn the other way when things don't go well and be like, well, hold on. I mean, he's the last pick in the draft. Yes, if that's the conversation that you always wanted to have, most certainly the last pick in the draft, he's already outplayed his contract. He's doing fantastic things. He's a starting level quarterback in the league. All those things are true. But if the conversation is, well, he's better than Justin Herbert, or he's on the Allen, his EPA is up there with Josh Allen, well, then guess what? You're going to be held to a different standard. So which one is it?
Yeah. Dave Barclay says 10-year vet, 10-year Jimmy vet is worse than most rookies. Well,
that is true.
I think the Raiders just learned that. Wave 9 says low-key want to see Sam Darnold. He has the arm talent at least. I want to see it too. I'm sorry. I want to see it. Kyle said he's good. I want to see it.
Decision making.
I know. James Monk says, dude, they pushed out Trey Lance for Sam Darnold. He needs to play this year. He can't just leave the team and never play. I need to see this. I need to see what this is all about. James Monk says team will get
Hopefully
high.
you see it after the 49ers have clinched the number 1 seed and you can see it the final week of the season, Grant.
James Monk says team will get high. They will fall short because of liability at quarterback. In the moment of truth, been happening since 2011. It's obvious and inevitable. Stop giving away the ending, okay? Some people don't know. Keith Murphy, the unbeaten, says you're supposed to build around a young quarterback. SF builds a team around him. Now we want to see him without a good team. Even Mahomes looks regular this year without weapons.
No. Here's the difference. When you take away the 2 top weapons from the 49ers, they still have adequate weapons. If you take away the 2 top weapons from Kansas City, who the hell is there? You got a bunch of nobodies, number 4 receivers. That's who he's throwing to. That's a big difference. You take away CMC and Debo from this team, they still have an all-pro tight end.
Yeah.
And a very good wide receiver. You can't do that across the league. That's not the way that works.
Dazza says apart from BP needing talent around him, he seems to struggle when he has to lead a comeback. That's not an elite quarterback and one you pay $40 million to. No, it's not. No, it's not. And in addition to when you add the turnovers in, it's very alarming. Joseph Stockbridge, my AFC team, Jags might steal my heart next week. Is Belichick or RVR the answer to DC needs? Yeah, Belichick's going to go be a DC.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Who's RVR?
Joseph, I do have a question though for you. I'm probably not going to see it, but maybe you can come over to my channel where it's less chaotic. But are the Jaguars your favorite team because you grew up in the Steve Young era and Brunell was like a poor man Steve Young? I'm curious because I enjoyed the Jaguars when I was a kid as well because of Mark Brunell.
Citybird says handicap the 2 Hawks games coming up. Thanks. Man, let's take them one at a time.
The Hawks
Citybird.
play the Ravens. I don't know who they play after that. I think the Ravens will win that game and the 49ers will be first again. Yeah.
Fish and Chip says the sideline prowler is the real choker, major form. The sideline prowler. Silverback says, Jesse, now you're on the wrong side of Jesus.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because he cares about 49er football.
Matt McEwen says, wonder what Kyle Shanahan's record as a head coach when going into the 4th with a lead is.
That's a great question. He posed this to me because everybody's throwing out he's 1-37 if he's down by 3 or more going into the 4th quarter, which a lot of people will make the excuse like, well, it's just really hard to come back. But how many leads has he blown in the 4th quarter? Because we know of a few big ones.
Joshua Bourne says, great job, guys. As a psychologist, I would love to talk one day about what players need to do to mentally get out of a rut or what coaches need to do. Berate your players. Tell them they're about to get fired. Tell them about to get benched. Tell them they better do better. I think that's the best way to do. Really, really stick it to them.
I love this, Josh. You can DM me. I've had a conversation like this about a year and a half ago on my channel, and I really enjoyed it.
Nicholas Parra says Niners have failed collectively in all phases. They've all taken turns, special teams, coaching, Purdy, CMC, defense, injuries, etc. Let's be real, guys.
Oh, yeah. No, hold on. What I don't want you to take from the conversation is that everything falls on Purdy. My expectation of Purdy was not that he was an elite guy or even would be the franchise guy. I knew that it would take a lot around him and almost perfection for them to be really good and win. So my expectation is that. And so I do put a lot of the blame on the things around him. But for those that did say the opposite, well, let's talk about it.
Nuclear Energy now says another pass rusher. Our team would have improved more with a CBOT versus another D line, diminishing returns when adding another D lineman.
It's better than nothing. Could have been nothing.
It's better than nothing. Could have been nothing. Cloud Strife says Wilkes needs call plays from the sideline like Saleh and Ryans did. There was no legit source for a Dory Jackson trade. All right, well, let's see if putting Wilkes on the sideline makes a difference. Christian Bradley says, what has changed from the first 5 games to now? Niners got punched in the mouth and they haven't been able to get back up. That's what happened.
They played good quarterbacks.
And PJ Walker.
The last 2 weeks.
DY.
PJ Walker, right. Texas Ranger.
Yeah. DYX says, isn't it funny how we all looked at Grant crazy 3 weeks ago when he brought up the possibility of Kyle sitting Purdy for Darnold? Now look, LOL.
They still look at him crazy.
It's true. Joey Lappin says, start, bench, cut, Purdy, Howell, Pickett.
Gosh.
I mean,
I don't get they're all whatever.
It's like the same. They're all in the same tier for sure. Cloud Strife says Seattle plays Washington after Ravens. I feel like they're going to beat Washington now that
They'll
Washington
beat
has no
Washington.
players
They'll
left.
lose to the Ravens. By the way, I'm cutting Pickett. The other two I could care less. Either
like
one of them
Pickett.
could start or bench.
Adam K says Brock Hill is next Montana. Sam is next Young. You both praise Brock for highs, criticize for lows. Fair assessment, in my opinion. Thank you, Adam. Brooks says, does Kyle think Brandon Allen could be the next Steve Bono? Probably. Wave 9 says Brock has made head-scratching plays since college.
Yes.
Trey Niner says Kyle is not a real head coach. He's a doodler disguised as a head coach. My dad penned that yesterday. This defense is trash. He's a doodler. He's a guy who doodles up plays. This defense is trash when they can't get sacks. They give up too many TDs. They can't stop the run, and it's a problem. If you don't believe me, just ask David Lombardi. Okay. Niners have lost 3 in a row, and we're often reminded, look, they've been here before, which is true. 2021, they lost 4 in a row.
4 in a row.
They lost
One
3
coming
in a row
off of a
going into
bye.
the bye week.
Yep.
Went to the bye week, lost again.
Yep.
I flipped out, wrote them off. They went on a run. Last year, they were 3-4, went on a run. This year, 5-3, lost 3 in a row. They've been here before. This is what they do. Is it foolhardy to bank on that?
Okay. The problem with the 49ers have been here before crowd is not that the 49ers can't rebound, because I think that they can and probably will rebound. I think they're going to make the playoffs. Hell, they might be on a nice little win streak going into the playoffs. However, the whole point of this season really was to get that number 1 seed. What can you do differently this season than you did the 2 seasons prior? And how can you not hit a wall going into the playoffs? Well, when you have a bye week in the middle of a season, the way the 49ers have had the last couple of years, and you come out of that bye week and it feels like you have to play playoff football for 9 weeks in a row just to get into the playoffs in a good standing, it eventually war of attrition happens, especially to a team that has a bunch of guys that are contributors that are around 30 or older. So when that's happening, that number 1 seed is extremely important. So my concern is not, can the 49ers turn it around? Yes, they can turn it around. My expectation is that they do turn it around. We're going to hype them up, feel really good going into the playoffs. But what happens once they get there and they get towards the tail end of the playoffs and they've had to do it 13 weeks in a row? Can they fight through that wall? Because that wall has been there the last couple of years, and that's ultimately what stopped them from getting there. And at this point, even if they quote unquote turn it around, I think the number 1 seed is almost completely out of the question.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's something different about this team. Like in 2021, they turned it around. How? Well, they had this brilliant idea to put Deebo Samuel at running back.
Mm-hmm.
It changed everything. And all I know is that Mike McDaniel was on that coaching staff. So maybe it was Kyle's idea, but it feels like something that Mike McDaniel would have thought of. And then last year, they were in a rut. And instead of Kyle Shanahan like thinking of the next wrinkle, like McDaniel or whoever did with Deebo moving to running back the year before, he traded for McCaffrey. And it worked so well, it was like a cheat code. So that changed everything last year. What's going to change everything this year? Chase Young. The defense is going to get him out of this rut. So, some health on offense and an addition to the defense. That to me is my question. It feels like you don't have D'Amico, his positive enthusiasm, his emotion and energy to bring things, like to turn things around. You don't have McDaniel's genius and intellect and creativity. You got Chase Young. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of what Steve Wilks and Chase Young are going to cook up together. It didn't work with Randy Gregory, who's not bad. I don't know.
He was playing pretty good.
Randy
Gregory. In spot chances, but I think he was playing pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to be the difference. They always come up with something, and I feel like they'll be able to do it. The other thing that I hear a lot that I kind of want to talk about as well is I keep hearing, well, until the 49ers lose with their whole host of players, I'm not worried. And I think it's a flawed way of looking at it, because the 49ers rarely have their whole host of players. You've got Trent Williams, who's missed at least 2 games every year for the last 8 years. George Kittle hasn't even missed his games yet. Like, he's pretty much almost guaranteed to miss 1 or 2 at some point. Debo's missed a couple. We'll see if he's even back after the bye. Hopefully he is. But players miss games. the way the NFL works, and it's definitely the way that it's worked for the 49ers. So when that happens, you have to find a way to win. You can't rely on everybody being healthy for the whole second half of the season into the playoffs. If that's what you're waiting for, and that's what you think it's going to take to win, then the 49ers aren't going to win, because that's just not going to happen.
No. I'm really skeptical about this team this year. They shouldn't have lost these 3 games in a row. They weren't that beat up. They were going against teams that were beat up. No Justin Jefferson, no Deshaun Watson, no Nick Chubb. You got no excuse. No excuse at all. This team feels different. It feels like it's been here before in that sense, but it's older. It's older. And I don't know. D'Amico isn't walking through that door. Mike McDaniel isn't walking through that door. We're going to talk about them a little later.
It is older. It definitely is. I do. I really think this team's going to turn it around. I think they're too talented not to. Kyle Shanahan's not perfect, but I do think he's a good head coach. I don't think it's enough to win a Super Bowl, though. And that's really all that matters. When we say turn it around, making it to the playoffs and finishing with the number 2 or number 3 seed is not. That's not what the aim is here. It's to win a Super Bowl. And I just don't think it's going to be. I think they're going to run out of steam again. And that's the issue that I have. Agree.
All right, let's take a little break to do some prize picks. And I'm really into prize picks all of a sudden because I won last week. We did 2, me and Ryan, and I won on Monday Night Football. Jimmy G being less than and Jared Goff being more than. So let's do it real strategic. Let's find 2 that we like and see if we can win, because I want to win. So you look around. Will Levis 202 against Pittsburgh. If you see any action you think is good, Lamar Jackson 232 against Seattle. Mahomes and Tua, big action against each other. What do you like? What do you see?
I actually kind of like Tua and the less than.
Tua less.
They're playing in like Germany or something, and Kansas City's defense is actually pretty good.
Okay.
So I like Tua and less.
Okay.
And then
Mahomes, Geno, Lamar.
Who's Love playing against?
Rams. 223. That's a low number.
That is a very low number. It's a very low number. Ooh. Who's Sam Howell playing
as low
against?
As it gets. Patriots. Minshew against Carolina. Young against Indianapolis. How about Zach Wilson? Man, against the Chargers? 215.
That's so. I don't know if I can.
Let's do Zach Wilson. These two. Tua and Zach Wilson. Can he get to 215?
Is such a low number, but man, this guy does not. Oh.
Can we get some help from the audience?
I'm going to say less. I'm going to say less.
For Zach Wilson, 215.
Zach Wilson.
Wow. All right, let's do it. I'm going less. Let's put it up to 60 to win 180.
Ooh, I like it.
Let's go for it. Place the entry. Thank you, Prize Picks. If you guys want to play, check out the link in the description. Use promo code Cohn for $100 price match on your first $100 deposit. All right, back to the show. I got a question for you, because that's how the show works.
That's fair.
Name the player who needs to step up most in the second half. That's not even a question. That's a command. Name the player who needs to step up the most in the second half.
You've been real kind of bossy the last couple of shows, I noticed. Sorry. But the player that needs to step up most in the second half is you talked about what are the 49ers going to do differently? How are they going to turn this around? A couple years ago, you said it was Deebo Samuel. Mm-hmm. I think that player this year also could and should be Deebo Samuel. One thing that's happened to Deebo Samuel since Christian McCaffrey has gotten here is his play has been sporadic at best, and for the most part he's been almost non-existent in a big chunk of these games. I think Deebo Samuel, coming off of some missed weeks, getting fresh legs, getting reinvigorated, I think he's the one that needs to step it up the most. He's getting paid a ton of money. He's also the one that's out here talking the most trash. He has to be the reason that these 49ers turn it around offensively. I expect that to be him. So I'm going to say Deebo Samuel, mainly because he's talked the most and hasn't played.
Okay, I like that one a lot. I mean, I was going to say Brock Purdy, but I almost feel like he needs to do less. Like, stop trying. You're not that guy. You're trying to step up and do too much in the fourth quarter, and that's kind of the root of the problem. So I don't know if he even can step up. This might just be him. We're talking about people who have more to give, and Debo's one of them. I think on defense, like, how about Nicholas Bosa? No. How about Nick Bosa? He's got all kind of excuses. Balls coming out. Like, defend the run better. Start there. Set the edge. You gave up that touchdown run, Joe Mixon. I mean, that was you. How about you set the run better? You set the standard of run defense for your DNs. And then, I don't know, like, earn that contract. He'd be one. I mean, I could say Talanoa Hufanga or Dre Greenlaw, and they need to step up too, obviously. Talanoa Hufanga is not the player he was last year, and Dre Greenlaw looks hurt. But
Charvarius Ward.
Bosa. Oh, my.
You're so disappointed. If Charvarius Ward was your kid, you'd say, Mooney, I love you, kid, but I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. That's the talk you would give to Mooney.
What happened to Charvarius Ward?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I do not know. Teams are
Who's better,
Charvarius
Ward or Diamond
picking on him.
I think they know something.
Picking on him.
He got targeted 8 times last week, 8 times the week before that, gave up 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think teams know. And the Rams did it week 2. They targeted him 9 times, completed 8 passes. And I think you look at it, Minnesota, O'Connell, that guy comes from the Rams, does he not? And then Cincinnati, Zach Taylor, that guy comes from the Rams. So I think the McVay guys understand you go after Charvarius Ward. You go out. And I don't know why some people give him respect, because it seems like you can have a lot of success going after Charvarius Ward. Also, Isaiah Oliver. The one guy I would kind of think twice about going after in the Niners secondary is Lenore. He doesn't really give up touchdowns. He's solid. But Charvarius Ward hasn't been solid.
No, and that's crazy, because Charvarius Ward, when you look at him, the advanced analytics the last couple of years, his last year in Kansas City and last year as well in San Francisco, man, he had some really good numbers. He was one of the better corners according to some of those advanced analytics. He's completely fallen off a cliff. I don't know. You remember camp, though? He was constantly on the sidelines. He was working through something all of training camp, it seemed, at least when I was there. And I don't know if that continued. Sure. Does he have an injury that is just kind of there for the season? Maybe he's got to deal with it. That could be possible, but
that's true.
Right now,
was it like a heel injury? Wasn't it? They called it like a calf injury. Yeah, something like that. Right before the season started.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was working through something, and I feel like maybe that has lingered into the season. He's just dealing with it.
Great point. That's a great point. Well, he needs to step up, or they need to. Too late to replace him. Yeah. Keith Murphy, the Unbeaten, says, "What do you guys think about Warner having to communicate through another coach to get to Wilkes during games? Is that true?"
Well, I mean, he would have to, because the sideline, right? He's not on the sideline, I guess. I don't know.
I think it's time for Wilkes to get on the sideline. Dazza says the D issues seem to coincide with Greenlaw injuries. Shows how underrated he is on the team.
Oh, most certainly. Dre Greenlaw.
He seems like he's been a shell of himself.
Yeah. He came back too early. He should have sat out last week.
Agree. Brother Bob says, Iglet, you hear PP said on your show BP equals dink and dunk. Did he? Did he say that? Maybe. Bobo says, yeah, Mahomes is super regular this year. 6-2 record, on pace for 4,800 yards and 32 touchdowns and a 75 QBR. When was the last Niners quarterback to do that? I don't think they've ever had one do that.
I don't. And again, the best he deals with is Kelsey and Pacheco and whatever receiver you want to say. That's as good as it gets. So that's very different than when it was bad for Brock Purdy. He only had Ayuk and Kittle and CMC. Poor Brock. Like, come on, man.
True. Dave Barclay says, does anyone think we beat Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, I think they can.
I mean, at this time, I wouldn't pick the Niners to win that game, but I'd like to see what Jacksonville does this weekend. Joshua Bourne says, okay, Jesse, I would be glad to discuss more about the psych angle and Grant, you two, if possible. I think there's much unspoken about this. All right, Josh. I like it, Joshua. James Monk says, JN, I'm such an old school fan. I cried when Jags beat Niners in preseason opener in 1999 as a 14-year-old.
There you go, James.
Francisco says, you guys think Sherm could ever be our DC?
Ooh. I would like to see him at least be a defensive back coach for a year before he would do that. But yeah, I think he could.
I think he wants to go into media, but yeah, I think
so.
He could. Nicholas Parra says, Philly plays Dallas. Who we rooting for? Cowboys.
tie. I don't both
care.
to lose. Is that could they both lose? That'd be great.
I'd like to see Richard Sherman as a head coach, kind of like Dion. I think he would be maybe even better.
Yeah, that's true.
Matt McEwen says corners need to hold coverage for more than 2.5 seconds. Yeah. Ford Tuck's dad says Grandpa Wilkes needs to go. He doesn't fit our team chemistry. We need another high-energy sideline guy. He's clearly not bringing another third-round comp pick like previous to DC, so cut ties before too late. I do think they need another high-energy sideline guy. I'm surprised Kyle didn't realize that.
I actually, you know what's interesting is I thought Wilkes was going to be that guy a little bit. The way that
because he was in Carolina.
That's what I'm saying. The way that Panthers fans talked about him and what I had seen from him, I was like, oh, this is, you go from Saleh to D'Amico to him. Yep. You're basically getting the same personality. Yep. Then I found out he was going to be up in the booth. Okay, I don't know how to feel about that, but clearly he's not that guy. I was wrong about that. And that was a big reason why I wanted him here.
Dave Barclay says, does Wilkes last the year?
Oh, man.
He might not last the next week if they lose. Jeremy Price. What up, Big Grant and Jess? I can hear him say it in his voice. Shout out EPA and my condolences to the Adams family as well as Devontae. Sheesh. Lord Voldemort will be retiring.
Man,
Devontae. I don't know what you're talking about. I never know what Jeremy Price is talking about, but I love him. Huh. Lord Voldemort will be retiring. Okay. Who was that?
I don't know.
I don't even know. Cloud Strife says, what if Patrick Mahomes was in the Niners offense today? They'd be worse. He wouldn't fit, though. He wouldn't fit. Yeah, Shady Luke says, I got players for you. The offensive line run blocking with McCaffrey is the foundation of a West Coast Shanahan offense. Aside from picks, can't put it all on Brock. He's still young as hell.
Oh, I agree with that. Yep. Agree.
Yep. 808 Niners says, if we had Saleh or Ryans, I wouldn't be worried, but the lack of continuity with Wilkes and the D is scary. There's no accountability for anyone on D. All right, that's my last topic for the day. Who do the Niners miss more right now, Mike McDaniel or D'Amico Ryans?
The crazy thing is when you look at this defense, as bad as it's been, the offense has actually been worse. The offense has been worse as far as points scored. We can talk about yards. We can talk about missed tackles. We can talk about a bad play call. But really, when you get down to it, it comes down to points scored and points against. And last week, they gave up a lot of points. But the reality of the situation was going into that fourth quarter, the game was there to be had, and the offense just couldn't score any points. They've scored 17 points 3 weeks in a row, which puts them like bottom 4 in the league, if that was their scoring average for the season. They were the number 2 scoring offense and went down to a bottom 4 scoring offense. So it's just as bad
down
over
there
there
with Denver and Houston. I mean, like over the last 3 games, I mean, let me tell you what teams are down there scoring 17 points a game. Atlanta, Tampa, the Jets. The Jets score 18 points a game. So that's where the Niners are right now. Yeah. All of a sudden, Brock Purdy and all of his magic is putting up essentially what Zach Wilson's putting up in New York.
So the offense hasn't been good either.
So right now he's a glorified Zach Wilson.
I'm going to say D'Amico. I don't want to put it all on him. It's not all his fault. Kyle Shanahan deserves some blame. Christian McCaffrey has not been effective in the run game. The offensive line has been whatever. But the offense hasn't been good. But I'm going to go with D'Amico just because I know that he brings an intense leadership to that defense that is clearly sorely missed right now. And I think the offense may not be as frustrated with play calling and coaching because they've got the same guy in place that is the head coach that they all seem to like. I don't know if that's the feeling from the players on defense. I don't know if they really jive with Wilkes. So I'd have to go with D'Amico.
It's a good answer. D'Amico is really good, and he had those players playing for him. I'm going to go with McDaniel. I feel like McDaniel's a good leader too. He's upbeat. He's positive. He gets the most out of his players. They like playing for him. They play hard for him, and he got the most out of Tua. I feel like this offense would not be scoring 17 points per game without Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel and everyone else there if McDaniel were here. I feel like Kyle, he just got a cheat code last year and has been super lazy. Just spam Christian McCaffrey. It worked for a year. Now it's not working so well anymore. And I don't know what his next idea is. Mike McDaniel never runs out of ideas. And I think they need a new idea right now. I think they do. I think Mike McDaniel might be the most clever, the most creative coach in the league. And I think he was a big part of their runs. 2019 to 2021. Those 2 years, I think he figured out Mostert. I mean, Kyle Shanahan was insisting on making Tevin Coleman happen. And I think Mike McDaniel was in the background being like, yo, what about this guy who runs a 4.3? He's really good. And as soon as he could bring it to Miami with him, he did. So I don't know. I think they could use one of those midseason brainstorms that McDaniel used to have.
If you could cover one coach in the league, who would it be, and why would it be McDaniel?
Oh, I like Kyle Shanahan. I like Kyle Shanahan because McDaniel's cool. McDaniel, like, if I asked him, are you considering benching your quarterback? He'd be prepared and he'd be poised and he wouldn't give me a soundbite. But Kyle Shanahan gets all his feathers are ruffled and it becomes something that gets played on first things first. It's like, man, I love Kyle Shanahan. You're so much fun. Thank you, man.
Did you see the presser last week though with McDaniels? It was so funny. I think it was a Thursday. And they asked him because Jalen Ramsey, they opened the practice window. So they're like, hey, is Jalen Ramsey going to play Sunday? And he goes, well, geez, I mean, Sunday, that's so far away from today. What's today, guys? And one guy goes, it's Thursday. He goes, it is. It is. What else is today? And they said, the only day that's today. And he goes, that's it. That's it right there. Today is the most important day because it's the only day that we have.
Is that his little team mantra?
He's so cheesy, but he's so funny.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I enjoyed covering him when he was here. He never ducked a question ever.
Yeah, he's
Stan 011 says, I think Chase will make opposing D think about doubling Bosa quicker to quarterback, which in turn helps our secondary. Also, getting Womack and Luter Jr. back into the mix. Definitely an upgrade back there. Thoughts? I don't see how you trust Darrell Luter Jr. on this team when he had no offseason.
Yeah, he's a rookie.
He feels like a red shirt like Cam Latu, maybe Sam Womack, but I've seen Sam Womack play a lot. What he does is he's in great coverage when he gives up a 50-yard catch. He's right there when he gives up the long catch. I don't really know if you want to do that. Tony Montana, $10. Thank you, Tony Montana. Keith Murphy, the unbeaten, $2. Jags on a bye, too. You won't see them this week. Oh, shows what I know. Sorry.
Oh, did you say? I didn't even catch that. Yeah, they are on a bye, and that's
my bad.
You look at last week, the 49ers had a disadvantage because the Bengals were on a bye going into that game. The 49ers don't have that same advantage this week because the Jags also have a bye.
Generic name says, couldn't care less about the D. Banana hands will always be the problem. They don't even practice a 2-minute drill. That is true. That is true. Kurt, what? Bankert said that? Jeremy Price, LOL, Jimmy G is he who must not be named. Voldemort, true.
Oh,
and how did Devontae, and how he did Devontae, who's from EPA? Yeah, I think Devontae had enough.
Yeah. Devontae was so frustrated.
808. Well, now he's got Aiden O'Connell, so enjoy. 808 Niners says, agree, Jess, about the O, but the D always carried us.
It's true.
29er says, I remember when everyone was saying fire Salah. Yeah, I was me. That was me. It's true.
Cloud Strife says, helped you in your career big time.
Oh my God. Yes. Cloud Strife says Chase has passed his physical.
There we go.
True. It's Nick for real says, be nice to have a healthy Verrett right now.
Well, wouldn't it be though?
Is he on Houston?
Yeah. I think so. I think they brought him in. I don't know if he's
who needs Jason Verrett when you have Isaiah Oliver? I'm sorry.
It's true. It's a good point.
Okay, last thing before we go. Jimmy Garoppolo officially benched by the Raiders. We've talked about it. But Jimmy Garoppolo, hold on. It's November 1st, 2023. And Jimmy Garoppolo is no longer a starting quarterback in the NFL. Are you surprised? This happened quick. I mean, he thought he was going to the Raiders to stick it to Kyle Shanahan. Your plays freaking stink. You've got chaos over there. What did he call it? A little messy or whatever with his quarterback situation. He goes to the Raiders. He gets to go and play in his system with Josh McDaniels. He pushes out Derek Carr, and they're all gone. It's November 1st, 2023, and they're all gone. Jimmy's on the bench. Are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised by this, Grant. I tried to tell Raider fans what was headed their way. They thought they were somehow getting an upgrade over Carr, who's not the greatest by any means, but he is not. He was never on Carr's level. We knew what Jimmy was here. We saw it game in and game out. And by the way, Jimmy had some good moments here. The 2019 49ers went to a Super Bowl. That team averaged 29.9 points per game. He was very efficient that season. He had a good the best 5-game run he had ever had with the 49ers with CMC right before he got hurt. But it was clear, man, that guy never had it. He was lifted up by the talent around him, the play calling, everything. He was never that guy. So no, I'm not surprised at all.
I'm not surprised either. I always felt he was a glorified backup. And I got this feeling when I watched, he was coming off an ACL. Okay. So it was like he had an excuse. He didn't have OTAs, but he was like there for training camp in 2019. And man, he wasn't better than Nick Mullins. And I know it was training camp, but you should look a lot better than Nick Mullins if you're a franchise quarterback. You're making whatever, 30-something million a year, and Nick Mullins is Nick Mullins. And I think he had a lot of people in the organization being like, oh, I think Nick Mullins might be pretty. Like, nah, it's just there's not a big enough gap between these two. There was a gap, but not a big enough. And I always felt like that says something about Jimmy Garoppolo. He's on a hell of a team. He has the best defense. The coach can scheme things open. We've seen that. He had Mike McDaniel for a long time and a great run game. I always wondered, like, what would it look like on another team? Well, we just found out. It would look terrible. And I think that's something to keep in mind with the latest quarterback, who I'm not going to say by name because it's not fair to just lump him in with Jimmy Garoppolo. They're not the same person. But I'm just saying, you as a fan, keep that in mind. You got to try to separate the quarterback from the team. And we just saw it happen with Jimmy Garoppolo. The Raiders couldn't figure that out. And they're paying for it. McDaniels couldn't figure it out. Mark Davis couldn't figure it out. They're all like, oh, I guess it was the supporting cat. Yeah, it was. Don't forget that Jimmy Garoppolo had like a 103 something rating with Christian McCaffrey last year. Don't forget. He was essentially undefeated with him, except for that one game against the Chiefs. Scary.
Yeah, and that was the first game. That was the Super Bowl champs. Yeah, most certainly. I don't know if I'm going to equate it to Brock. I mean, Brock is
who brought up Brock? Not me. I didn't do that. What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I didn't say anything about Brock.
Yeah, you're right. You didn't. Never mind. I'm totally bringing this out of left field. But
yeah, that's not fair.
As far as Jimmy goes, I mean, come on, man. This is the problem. It is hard to separate because you can look at all the numbers, the winning percentage remember the graphic for years. Kyle's winning percentage, Jimmy Garoppolo. Look at how when he's in, they win. I don't know how to explain it. They just win. Oh, his EPA is top of the league. He's better than Mahomes and Allen and this and that. His quarterback rating is this. None of that mattered. He just wasn't good. The eye test told you that. And now you see it for real. So I'm not surprised.
Sorry, Jimmy. Dave Barclay says, how many players on this team but only touch field for special teams? The backup tight ends, Jair Brown. They traded up for him so he could cover kicks. It's really important. Wow, he's even good. What you didn't understand was those first 3 picks this year, special teams. Cam Lotsu was going to be special teams, but
none of this draft class is not contributing. I mean, Moody, and then you got one game from Bell, but the draft class is not contributing. And Moody's had he's had his issues. We know that. So it's not. We'll see. We'll see how it redshirts into next year. That seems to be the thing that they do. But as of now, this draft class is not contributing.
Fish and Chip says Jimmy got benched by Niners too. Nothing new here. Kev F says, if they get Harbaugh, could Jimmy G be Alex Smith?
I don't think he'd want Jimmy G.
No, absolutely not. Don't think so. Brother Bob says, guys, stop it. Purdy's better than Montana. Who's better than Mahomes? Who's better than Herbert? True.
Maybe. You might be
That's
right.
That.
It's a good point. I never thought about it.
All right, the show's over. Make sure you like and subscribe this show and my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe Jesse's channel. And do you have a show going on in 13 minutes?
I have a show going on in 3 minutes. Call-in show. Tap in over there. So if you disagree with what I've set up here, you're more than welcome to call in. It'll be a good conversation. I promise I'll be very friendly. And if you do agree, you can call in also. I don't discriminate. So feel free to call in. Last Second Sports, tap in. 2 minutes. We'll see you there.
See you guys.